Hello and welcome to another tier list, this time for the level 3 spells available in Baldur's Gate 3. First of all, I would hope this goes without saying, this is my own subjective view of these spells, so I can expect lots of you to have different feelings about these spells, where they go, and that's perfectly fine. So I would ask that you give the common courtesy of explaining why I'm wrong. Comments such as, your list is objectively wrong, are just going to get completely ignored because they add nothing to the conversation. And that's the point of these tier lists, is to create discussion so we can all share with each other what we find useful about the spells and maybe some extra information we don't know. Now, how do I rate spells? I try to take several things into account. First of all, what other spells are on those class spell lists? So for example, Conjure Barrage is only available to rangers, so I'm going to be comparing this to other ranger spells. Secondly, does the spell require concentration? Because that's a very big mechanic in Baldur's Gate 3 and, well, it comes from 5th edition. Is it useful throughout the game? So when we get these spells here, we get them at level 5. Now, am I only using this at level 5? Will I be using this up until level 12 at the end of the game? Does the spell have any utility, any extra effects, and can it be upcast to give a more powerful version of the spell? And if it deals damage, what type of damage does it deal? Generally, I will favor lightning and cold damage because that can be doubled from the wet condition. Also, I do kind of prefer radiant damage because radiant damage is very useful in Act 2. There are several enemies who are vulnerable to it. Also, radiant damage is one of the ways to give out radiating orbs, which is a very strong debuff you can put onto enemies. I do try to tend to avoid taking into account specific items and subclasses because you may just not have found those items. It might not be possible in your playthrough, and perhaps you just don't want to play with a specific subclass. However, there are some spells that just have such a strong link to some subclasses or maybe items that I will mention them, but overall I try not to take those into account. And I do try to pick an overall tier. So if I thought Haste was really not useful at level 5, but is really useful at level 12, I'm going to take somewhere in the middle between S and C. I can only put the spell in one place in the tier list. I'm not going to split it up for every single subclass, every single level, or every single item that could be useful for a spell. I'm giving an overall impression of the spell. So starting off with Animate Dead. This is available to clerics, wizards, Circle of the Spores druids, and Oathbreaker paladins. For this spell to work, you do need a medium or small corpse. They can't be knocked out, they do have to be a corpse, which makes sense. And we get several options. Now, Gale here is at level 12, so I've got some even extra options. But at level 5, when you can first get the spell, you get the option of a zombie or a skeleton. If you upcast the spell, you actually get to target more corpses. Gale is a necromancer, so he can create an extra undead minion. But level 4, it creates 3 either zombies or skeletons. At level 5, you then get a choice of ghouls, either flying or not. And then if you upcast that to level 6, you can create up to 3 or 4 if you're a necromancer of these ghouls. This does not require concentration, which is great. Obviously, we've got a use for it at every spell level. And these undead ghouls or zombies or skeletons can have buffs cast on them, such as Longstrider. Now, I've already cast aid on the group, but I can give them aid at level 3, perhaps. So now they have 10 extra hit points each. And now I have got many people in my party, not just the 4 party members. And even if you use the level 3 or level 4 version of the spell, it's very useful to have an extra body on the field, dealing a bit of extra damage, and also taking extra damage that isn't going to the rest of your party. I'm going to stick this in S tier. I don't often use the spell myself, but I can see the power of the spell. One thing I really like is that we can upcast it at level 4, 5, and 6, and we get extra effects from it. And having extra bodies on the field is just really, really useful. Beacon of Hope is next. And this is available to clerics and Oath of Devotion paladins. So what does it do? You create an aura, and within that aura, any healing done gets maximum healing done. And everyone has, or allies, have advantage on wisdom saving throws and death saving throws. Now it does require concentration. Upcasting, it doesn't do anything. So this works well if you've got area of effect heal. Not well, but you get more use out of it if you use area of effect heals. So everyone there got the maximum of 9 healing, which isn't a lot really, because it's healing word, mass healing word. Now I'm not in any particular trouble here at the moment, but if I do throw a potion of superior healing, here we are. Now I can affect multiple people here. we get a maximum of 40 healing. That's all very well and useful, but for me the concentration requirement kind of ruins it, because at level 3, especially for clerics, we do have another awesome spell. And one of them, Spirit Guardians, get to that later, takes concentration. Now, it can probably save you in a pinch. Some people have said that to me in the past, but I so rarely feel the need to cast it. Sure, advantage on death saving throws sounds great, but you can almost certainly get someone back up before they die from failing death saving throws. Now, the advantage on wisdom saving throws, on the other hand, is good, because any spells that affect wisdom saving throws are often very, very powerful and will take your character out of combat, and you do not want that to happen. But I'm going to leave it in C tier because I think it's a bit too situational. I don't find myself needing to take this, and as a cleric, I probably want to prepare some other spells rather than Beacon of Hope most of the time. Bestow Curse. This is available to bards, clerics, wizards, great old one warlocks, Oathbreaker paladins, and all warlocks can also get this if they pick the Eldritch Invocation, called Sign of Ill Omen. So it has a melee range. You've got several different things it can do, so potentially a lot of utility. 6 of these are giving disadvantage on a particular type of saving throw. So that's the Charisma, Constitution, Dexterity, and so on. Or we can give an enemy a disadvantage on their attack rolls. Our attack rolls and spells deal an additional 1d8 necrotic damage to the target. Or we can fill them with dread and they can possibly skip their turn. So it does require you to get into melee, and it is a wisdom saving throw to resist these, and it does require concentration. We can upcast them. All it does is increase the number of turns, which, considering these, I'm guessing you're going to cast these in combat, 10 turns is enough. There's pretty much no reason to upcast it. Now, lots of these effects sound good, because they are, but there are usually other ways to get these. We can give disadvantage on Constitution saving throws by inflicting bleeding on a target. For Dexterity, we can knock them prone. Wisdom, we can daze them with our weapon abilities from the martial, well, it doesn't have to be martial classes, but more likely to be martial classes. Giving disadvantage on attack rolls, there's a level 2 spell Blindness, which doesn't require concentration. Now that's a Constitution saving throw instead of Wisdom. Additional 1d8 damage, that's just like Hunter's Mark or Hex. Now most of the classes that get Bestow Curse don't get Hunter's Mark or Hex, but to use a level 3 spell slot to do this, I do not think is worth it. The only one really worth casting, I think, is Dread. Now, they can possibly skip their turn if they fail their Wisdom saving throw. This would be really good on especially on a boss or just difficult creature. So who goes next? This one. So we'll try it. So we'll see what happens on their turn. Oh, they passed. So then they can attack. So it's not even guaranteed. That was a 90% chance to work. Let's just check their... Yeah, they're all a 20. Okay, that's like just a bit unlucky. I'm going to leave this down in C tier again. The upcasting is pointless. It's concentration, and most of these classes want to concentrate on something else most of the time. Most of the effects just aren't worth a level 3 spell slot. Blinding Smite is next. This is only available to paladins. So what does it do? You attack an enemy, it uses your action and bonus action in a level 3 spell slot. It does an additional 3d8 radiant damage on a hit, and if the enemy fails a Constitution saving throw, they become blinded. Let's give it a go. Nice. That's not right. I mean, I would probably have just smited there, used the Divine Smite there. I guess they've passed their Constitution saving throws, so they're not blinded. And in the end, what I did was an additional 3d8 damage. I don't particularly like this Smite spell. One thing I don't like is that it uses a bonus action. Now, I get that all the Smite spells do that, but we're using a level 3 spell slot and a bonus action. If I had potentially just used my level 3 spell slot to Smite instead of using this, I could have killed him. I've got other uses for my bonus action. I've got a particular weapon here that gives me an extra bonus action attack. I've got Hunter's Mark from an item. I might want to jump around. I might want to use another spell that uses a bonus action, which will come up later. I'm going to leave this at C tier. I think as a paladin, there are other level 3 spells I'd rather cast, or just use my level 3 spell slot to smite. Next up is Blink. Blink is available to sorcerers, wizards, and archfey warlocks. So this can only be used during combat. So it uses an action, and at the end of your turn, there's a 50% chance you'll go to the ethereal plane. While you're there, you can't be harmed or seen. If you don't pass that, then you just stay where you are. So I'm going to cast this. Upcasting doesn't do anything. So we've got the blink condition. And then I'm just going to skip those in. I want to point out Gale is currently concentrating on slow. Now, he didn't disappear, so he didn't go to the ethereal plane, so he can still be targeted. Alright, he's gone. Annoyingly, in Baldur's Gate 3, if you're concentrating and you do blink away, you lose concentration, which I think is absolute nonsense. Should not really be happening. So what is it good for? It is kind of good for defense for whoever's casting it. One thing you need to bear in mind is that it completely negates any area of effect damage coming to your character. But if your character isn't there, it does mean your other 3 characters or summons present have to pick up the slack and will be targeted instead. So really you're just deflecting attacks onto other people. So he can't be affected here. One cool thing is at the start of your turn after blinking away, if you want to, you can move up to 20 feet away. I do wish that was a bit higher. 20 feet isn't very far, but you can blink and then take your action as normal. And at the end of the turn, oh, he's gone again. One thing to keep in mind though, is that he can't benefit from any buffs either. Your allies cannot target anyone who's blinked with anything to help them, like healing or buffs. I really dislike currently that the fact that blinking breaks concentration, for me, really can't put it any higher than C. Because sorcerers, wizards, and warlocks are very often concentrating on something, and there are some very important spells in level 3 even. Ooh, lightning is next. This is available to druids, tempest domain clerics, storm sorcery sorcerers, and bards via the magical secrets. Warlocks who picked Pact of the Tome also get this once per long rest at level 5. So lightning strikes all targets within range. So we got 60-foot range. The radius, we're not actually told the radius. It's okay. Not the smallest radius we've got for an AoE, not the largest.
Witnessed assaulting someone.
And so it does 3d10 damage. It can be upcast for an extra 1d10 damage per spell level. And of course it's lightning damage, so this can be doubled. Doesn't say it's going to get the 2 at the edge, but actually did good. It is a spell that requires concentration, but as long as you maintain it, you get a new action over here, which actually counts as a cantrip. So any items that affect cantrips can actually currently affect cool lightning. So I can do this again. This time the damage should be doubled. Oh, there we are. And look at that. And oh, I love the sound. I do want to point out this is an area of effect spell. I have seen someone on Reddit saying this, oh, this wasn't very good because it just does 3d10 damage. Please don't use this on a single target. It would be a waste. There's no doubt about that. This should be used on multiple targets, and if they're wet, then that's even better. So here this has done what, 88 damage, and I can do that again next turn as long as I maintain concentration. One thing to keep in mind is that druids don't get very many level 3 spells, and I'm going to get to some of them later that basically aren't very good. So compared to the other spells druids get, I think for me this is definitely S tier. It's an AoE, it's lightning damage, it sounds cool and looks cool, and I can keep casting it again and again and again. It's a very efficient use of a level 3 spell slot, that is for sure. Next up is Conjure Barrage, which is only available to rangers. Do bear in mind, anytime I mention rangers or paladins in this tier list, they only get these spells at level 9. So Conjure Barrage has 2 different options. You can either conjure your melee weapon or your ranged weapon. You do 2d8 damage plus then the normal damage of the weapon that you've selected. So this my Tav ranger's melee weapon is far superior to his ranged weapon. We get this quite a large cone. That's actually a very large cone compared to most cones we get in the game. Unfortunately, it does affect allies. So you do have to be very careful with where everyone is. In fact, I've used my bonus action to shove a prone Gale out the way to make sure he doesn't get affected by this. One thing to keep in mind is that this takes your whole action. Now this ranger is a hunter, and at level 11 we effectively get a very good alternative to this. Now I said I wasn't going to include subclasses too much, but considering this is just for rangers and they only have 3 different subclasses, I think this is actually quite important. So to 1/3 of rangers out there, potentially, this isn't going to be very useful past level 11. The range of the whirlwind attack is not as big, but you can do it twice per action. It's basically 2 attacks. and it doesn't affect allies. I'm going to leave this at A tier, not S tier, because this is only available to one class, so there's not much competition. And rangers don't get very many level 3 spells to choose from. But the fact is a third of the subclasses get an alternative feature that's not exactly always better, but it can be used multiple times per action, and in fact constantly. And it does affect allies. If it didn't affect allies, I think I'd put it up to S tier, but I'm going to leave it at A tier. Next up is Counterspell. Available to sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and bards via their magical secrets. This spell is a reaction spell, so it's quite difficult to potentially record it. But when an enemy tries to cast a spell, and sometimes other actions as well, you can cast this spell as a reaction to stop it. If it was a level 3 spell or lower, it's automatically stopped. If it's higher than level 3, then you have to do a check to stop it instead. But you can upcast this, so if an enemy is casting a level 4 spell and you upcast this at level 4, it automatically stops it. So I'm hoping I'll be able to show you that now. It does require a reaction, so I can't use these and expect to be able to counterspell. So here she goes. So she's used Command Grovel. It says level 1 enchantment spell, but I can see she's cast it on 4 targets, which must mean she's cast it at level 4. I get the option of which level I want to upcast it or cast Counterspell at. I'm going to use the level 4 spell slot here. And we'll find completely stopped. That's it. Command isn't cast. Do bear in mind, enemy wizards, especially in the Flaming Fist, do use this on you, and I find it so annoying when it happens. This is another S tier spell. This just, you can stop so many bad things from happening. That command, if it had worked, even on just 1 or 2 of my party, that's half of my actions gone for that round. And it can be, you can stop some very bad things happening to your party. The opportunity has come up for me to show you Counterspell at level 3 against this Command Grovel again. This time there's a failed Counterspell. Now we don't know how that works because we're not shown. And now 3 of my party have to skip their turn. Next up is Crusader's Mantle. This is available to War Domain Clerics at level 5, Bards from their magical secrets, and Paladins get it at level 9. So what does it do? I've actually already cast it in the previous round. So it's a concentration spell, and everyone within 30 feet, allies within 30 feet, gain a 1d4 bonus to their weapon attacks. So if I attack Blaze Liara Portier here, I got an extra 1d4, and I can do it again. And I got an extra 1d4. This 1d8 is just improved Divine Smite, just because I got to a high Paladin level, and I've got my offhand attack. No, I've got a bonus action attack. There it is. So 1d4 doesn't sound like much, I suppose, but if you've got lots of people using weapon attacks, then actually that starts to add up. Now it is concentration. I'm hoping we'll be able to pass the saving throws here. So if Tav here starts attacking also, we got an extra 2 radiant damage here. And we got some more. That was a critical hit. Do bear in mind, this does also get doubled on a critical hit. This one's quite heavily dependent on your party setup, your party composition. If you've only got maybe the Paladin or War Domain Cleric using the, or I guess Bard, using weapon attacks, then this is almost pointless. If you've got maybe 3 people using weapon attacks, then this is quite good, because for Paladins especially anyway, we do need to compare this to Divine Smite. So Divine Smite will get, at level 3, will get us 4d8 damage, and unless I maintain concentration, I won't necessarily get that much damage from all of the additional weapon attacks. It also depends on the battle. I mean, here actually it's probably quite a good use because I've got lots of enemies to kill, and this fight will last longer than just 2 or 3 turns. However, if you've got a relatively short fight, it's probably better just to take someone out with a Divine Smite rather than spread all the damage out across many different enemies. I'm going to put this in B tier. For clerics, they've got better things to concentrate on. For paladins, it might just be better to use a spell slot for a Divine Smite just at the right moment, but it's not bad. It does require concentration, so I don't think I want to put it any higher, but radiant damage can be very useful. Daylight is next. This is available to clerics, druids, sorcerers, bards via the magical secrets, rangers, and paladins. So there are 2 options when you cast Daylight. One, you can enchant an item or weapon, a bit like the light cantrip, or you can create a sphere, very large sphere here. And when you cast it like this, it will dispel magical darkness I'm actually going to cast it on some armor, which you can also do with the light cantrip. Chance item, make it half. Get very bright light. Lovely bright light.
One true way.
Oh, whoa, that should not have happened. Oh, there we are. It's come back. Whew. That took some time. So it creates light for us, just like the light cantrip. It dispels magical darkness, which is cool. But also, the reason I've come all the way back here is there are some enemies that have a feature called Sunlight Sensitivity. While in sunlight, this creature has disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks. Drow are another enemy that notably have this daylight sensitivity. So we're going to start this fight, and we should find, as long as I'm close enough, these guys should have disadvantage on any attack rolls that they do. So let's check that. Yep, they had disadvantage there. They hit still, but they still had that disadvantage. Use main hand attack, disadvantage. Because of its usefulness also in Act 2, against the shadow enemies especially, I'm going to stick this in A. I will say though that towards the end of the game, there aren't very many places where this really shines. We don't end up in too many dark places either. But it doesn't require concentration. You can cast it, and it's there for the rest of the long rest. So it's very, very useful. Next is Elemental Weapon. This is only available to Paladins. So what does it do? You pick one of the elements. We've got Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, and Thunder. And this goes onto a weapon of your choice. This could be yours, it could be an ally's. And that weapon gains a +1 bonus to attack and deals an additional 1d4 damage of the chosen element type. I'm going to go for Lightning. So I'm concentrating on it. And it's until long rest or until you lose concentration. So if I go and attack, do you know, I'm going to go attack this archer.
You were witnessed assaulting someone.
So I did an additional, and that time I did an additional 3 damage. So every attack I do, I'm going to do an additional 1d4 damage. There we are, another 1d4 damage. So it's a bit like a better version of magic weapon, but I don't particularly care for magic weapon that much. The 1d4 damage just isn't really enough. I understand perhaps if it was higher it would perhaps be too strong, but you're likely to lose concentration at some point during your long rest, and you don't know when it's going to happen. The concentration really kills this for me. If I could make every enemy wet, then I suppose an extra 2d4 damage would be good. I'll leave it at C tier. I guess it has its uses, that we can increase the damage of the cold or lightning. If we know someone is vulnerable to one of the particular element types, I can choose that. But again, for paladins, this has to and does compete with divine smites. If you can get 50 swings of your weapon, then actually this adds up to quite a lot. But if you only get like 3 or 4 swings before you long rest or you lose concentration, then it's really pointless. Next up is Fear. Available to bards, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, trickery domain clerics, and gloomstalker rangers. Targets drop everything, it'll be their weapons, and become fearful, so they have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. It's a wisdom saving throw to resist it. It is concentration, lasts 2 turns. So get a big cone like this. Doesn't affect allies. So try and get those 4. So we can see 3 of them failed their saving throws there. Yeah, and you can pick up those weapons if you want, and they do run away. They're not going to come and harm me. So in fact, I'm going to go pick this up. And I could have been cleverer there. I could have set this up to have all my allies right next to someone who's fearful. So when they walk away, they take opportunity attacks. And this dude does go next, right? So let's try and not kill him, shall we? Now, Gale isn't the best person to have an opportunity attack with, but it can happen. So I've really split this fight into 2. I've now got to kill 2 people here and then kill those 3 separately afterwards, and it'll be easy to get rid of those 3. I'm going to leave it at... Oh, I'm torn between A and S. Definitely A, because the effect is very strong. It's an AoE, doesn't affect allies. The reason I'm struggling between A and S is, 1, it's concentration, and there are lots of concentration spells in the game, and secondly, it only lasts 2 turns. I think had it lasted longer, I'd put it up into S. But it's a very strong spell. Really good spell to have. Feign Death is next. Available to bards, clerics, druids, and wizards. It doesn't require concentration. It doesn't do anything when upcast. So you can put an ally into a protective coma so they become resistant to all damage, not immune, resistant, so will still be hurt by AoEs. Disease and poison have no effect. So you can't target anyone who is yellow, neutral, but you can target an ally. You can target yourself even. So I could, yeah, why not? Let's target Lae'zel. Sure, Shadowheart would love that. So Lae'zel's going to hang around there for 10 turns, doing nothing. If she takes damage, it will be halved, unless it's psychic damage. But she still takes damage until she gets back up after 10 turns is over. You can get someone back up by helping them, by using the help action. One other slightly easier way, out of combat at least, just unmemorize it, unprepare it, and then it stops. There's only one use I've read of. It's completely a pointless spell, apart from, I suppose, to show off this particular use. Got to keep in mind you can only cast it on allies. One way to make someone an ally is by improving their attitude with you. So if you give them a whole load of stuff, yeah, they're now green. Right. So now I can put Volo to sleep. He doesn't care. Well, not to sleep, Feign Death. So now we can pickpocket Volo. Steal. Oh, we failed. And he doesn't care. So I can try this again.
What am I to do?
So yeah, I can just steal what I want. So yeah, you can... Oh no, we failed. And it doesn't really matter. That's just complete critical miss for me. I don't care about that one niche use for Feign Death. It's a level 3 spell slot. Like I'd almost love the idea of it. It feels like you should be able to be creative with this. Maybe you can get someone somewhere, sneak someone in. Oh look, they're dead. But there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no use for it. It's such a, in combat, it's such a waste of an action. You may as well let someone go down and then just revive them. Or you heal them. After all, bards, clerics, and druids can all get this. So you can have healing word or mass healing word instead. Just, it's such a pointless spell in the game, in Baldur's Gate 3. Next up is Fireball. I'm sure most of you know where this is going to go. This can be learned by sorcerers, wizards, light domain clerics, and fiend warlocks. So what does it do? Well, while this loads in, it's an area of effect spell that does 8d6 damage to everyone inside the radius. Now I saved this here while I was playing through one of my characters, because I've got almost like the best possible use for it. It hits allies unless, I guess, you're an evocation wizard.
Let my enemies fall.
And in this particular instance, they will die anyway because of the type of enemy. And that one level 4 spell slot, it can be upcast, and actually, there's an extra 1d6 damage per spell level above level 3. This is quite a rare circumstance where these Shadow Curse Needle Blights explode when they die in this needle burst. So that really helped. But nevertheless, use this on a group of enemies. It's probably not worth using this on a single enemy. It requires a dexterity saving throw from the enemies, and even if they pass, they still take half the damage. Despite it being fire damage, kind of a resisted type, it's still just over the top in terms of the actual damage done. It's just ubiquitous with wizards and Dungeons and Dragons. How could it not be S tier? Next up is Gaseuous Form, available to sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, Circle of the Spores druids, Circle of the Land druids, get it at level 5, and bards via the magical secrets. So you can transform one person into, well, some gas. Now the Gaseuous Form is not useful in combat, but that's not really the point of it. It is a concentration spell, but lasts until long rest. There's no turn limit on this. There are two important points about the spell. One, it can fly. So we can get to wherever we want, as long as we can make a path to it. And secondly, I don't have any ready here, but secondly, it can fit through any of small gaps that you find. So any pipes or small openings in random places, the Gaseuous Form can go through it. It can go through any sort of jail bars, anything that's barred. As long as you can see your way somewhere, your Gaseuous Form can go there. I guess it's worth pointing out that your strength and dexterity are set to 10, but also resistant to all damage and also have advantage on Constitution, Strength, and Dexterity saving throws. But we can't do anything else in this form. Can't attack, can't cast spells. So in that sense, yeah, like I said, it's not really going to be that useful in combat. But for getting, it's a strange way around, but for getting around, it's really, really good. Very good for exploration. It does require concentration. I'm going to put it at A. We can't upcast it to get any extra effects. For exploration, it's very good, but it only affects one ally, so it can be quite difficult to get anyone else to follow them. And they might be able to go places others can't, which has its drawbacks potentially. Glyph of Warding is up next. This is available to bards, clerics, and wizards. So when you pick Glyph of Warding, you have different variants. We've got some that will cause damage. So we've got acid, cold, fire, lightning, and thunder. We've also got the opportunity to have detonation, which knocks people back, and opportunity to put enemies to sleep. And the area is pretty decent, about the same as Fireball. The damage on the variants that do damage is 5d8, so less than Fireball. So what happens, you can cast it on the ground. At the moment, the spell hasn't gone off because these NPCs are neutral. It only goes off if there is if there is an enemy NPC, someone who is hostile. But once it goes off, everyone within the area is affected. So once I click attack, boom, it goes off and they make dexterity saving throws. Fist Jespin here passed, and I put them all to sleep. Elves and half-elves are immune to magical sleep, so wouldn't work on them. It doesn't require concentration. These enemies are now asleep for 2 turns, so perhaps it would be a good idea to try and get rid of Fist Jespin or Fist Wern first. People who are asleep can be shoved awake. Also, it's probably good to show you that if you are within 10 feet of a sleeping enemy, you do get a critical hit automatically. Now, bear in mind, this is on the Bard and Cleric spell lists, and for Bards especially, this is one of the big damaging spells they can get that works well throughout the game. We can get this going into S tier. We can get different variants, so we can get the lightning and cold damage, which can be doubled. We've got the utility of sleep or detonation, knocking people back. So against the Dwergar I showed earlier, you can put that onto their boat and knock potentially quite a lot of them into the water very, very quickly. The wizards, maybe not S, maybe an A, but regardless, with all the options we get, it's such a strong spell. Next up is Grant Flight. It used to be called Fly because that's what it's called in 5th edition. I guess they changed the name because there is an action called Fly, just like they changed the name of the spell Jump to enhance leap. This is available to sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, Circle of the Land Druids, and bards via the magical secrets. It is a concentration spell, and you can target someone to let them fly on their turn, and this lasts for 10 turns only. Upcasting it does let you target more people, but they have to be within small range. So I could cast it on Shadowheart, and then she has this fly class action, and she could fly up to here. Kind of cool. But it requires an action to cast, so now Gale can't do much on his turn. So yeah, let's just say we fly up to here. I can't see anyone from up here actually. This is a really bad space to come up to. That is my fault though, that's not the spell's fault. I'm going to leave this in C tier. The fact it only lasts 10 turns is really annoying, and it's concentration, so in combat, I probably want to be concentrating on something else, but I can see that it could be useful trying to traverse certain terrain, some lava or something. If you really want to get across a gap, then yes, we can use this. Outside of combat, Gaseuous Form is probably more useful, but at least with Flight you do get to be able to do everything else. So this is kind of the Flight combat spell, but it's just 10 turns and it's concentration. Most of the classes, or all the classes that get this, probably want to be concentrating on something else. Next up is Haste, available to sorcerers, wizards, Circle of the Land Druids for the Arctic or Grassland variants. Warlocks who pick Pact to the Tome get this at level 5 once per long rest. Bards can pick this up with their magical secrets, and Oath of the Vengeance paladins also get this. So what does it do? It does several things. You become hastened, so you get a +2 bonus to armor class, cool. Advantage on dexterity saving throws, also useful. Your movement speed is double, amazing, and it can take 1 additional action per turn. This makes the spell pretty much overpowered for a level 3 spell. So we're going to cast it on Will. So yes, it does require concentration, so I do need to try and make sure Gale is somewhat safe. What makes this so good? Unlike in 5th edition, the additional action is a whole additional extra action. So I can take, after my first action, I've used my first action now, I can still take 2 more attacks. So anyone who's got 3 attacks per turn, if you've got a Paladin, Warlock, Multiclass, Pact of the Blade, or level 11 Fighter, that's 3 extra attacks. Now, if the condition ends, I'm going to artificially end it early here. The person who was hasted, not the caster, but the person who was hasted, becomes lethargic and they can't do anything on their turn. And so Will just missed his turn there because he was lethargic. This is S tier, this should really be above. Now it is concentration, but this is the spell that all the other concentration spells have to compete with for the classes that have haste as a spell. This is such a strong spell, and you can combine this, like with sorcerers can twin this. Spellcasters who are hasted, I didn't even mention this, spellcasters who are hasted can then cast 2 spells per turn. Haste is just too good, almost too good. Hunger of Hadar is up next, available to warlocks and bards via their magical secrets. So this spell has quite a few different things going on. It's got 2 different types of damage. One is if creatures start their turn in the area, they take 2d6 cold damage, which of course can be increased with the wet condition. If if creatures end their turn, they take 2d6 acid damage. The area is difficult terrain, which is kind of cool because it can make it quite difficult for enemies to get out. And it's magical darkness. So
Witnessed assaulting.
something that happens with Hunger of Hadar is if you're outside it and you've got dark vision especially, you have advantage on attacks with everyone inside because they are blinded. So let's use my Dread Ambusher here. But bear in mind, if you go inside, then you are going to suffer the effects of this as well. Now it is a concentration spell, so depending on what happens here... Oh, it's okay, Will's outside. Just bear in mind, you can only get advantage on enemies inside if you have dark vision. Gale here does not have dark vision. He does not get advantage on this attack roll because it's too dark. If you combine this with some way to slow enemies down even further, such as Grease, we should find... So there's the 2d6 damage at the top. They will try and get out as quickly as they can, which is fair enough. Can't blame them for trying, but they will walk through it if they don't have any other choice, and it slows them down. So they took the 2d6 acid damage. Alright, so they got out, they took some damage. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Torn between A and S tier. I think I'm going to leave it at A. It's a very good spell. Kind of depends a little bit on where your battle is taking place. In an outside area with a lot of space, enemies can probably get around it quite easily. If I'd come back here and force them through a choke point here, it'd be really, really good because they would have to come through and suffer the effects of it. Next up is Hypnotic Pattern, available to bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. So you have an area of effect and you hypnotize the creatures inside. They cannot move or act. It is a concentration spell with a wisdom saving throw. And I've kind of got this set up quite nicely with all the enemies within this area. It's a very big area, which you might think, yeah, that's good, but it affects you and your allies also, which is kind of annoying. So let's do this. Got some of them hypnotized. Not quite as many as I would have liked. And so now, yeah, can't take actions, bonus actions, or reactions, but it's removed when by taking damage. So actually, this isn't necessarily the best place to have done this, because at the start of their turns, they're going to take damage and they won't be hypnotized anymore. So if I want to keep them hypnotized, I'm going to have to take down Hunger of Hadar. So now 3 of them will not take actions on their turn. Kind of cool. Could be helped, but then that takes up an action of an enemy, which is fine, as long as you've put more than one person under the effect of the spell. Yes, it is a concentration spell, unfortunately. Ah, Calm Emotions. Right, let's just show you this. This is kind of the thing that completely nullifies something like Hypnotic Pattern. You don't see many enemies with that. I'm going to leave it at B tier for a few reasons. 1, it's concentration. 2, it affects allies. And 3, it only lasts 2 turns. And as soon as anyone takes any damage, this is removed. So even if you accidentally burn someone, they're going to not be hypnotized anymore. Next up is Lightning Arrow. This is only available to rangers, so they only get this at level 9. So you target an enemy. Oh, it doesn't have to be an enemy. You target someone, and bear in mind this will affect allies. And then around the person or whatever you've targeted around the target, there's an area of effect where anyone standing in that area is also affected.
Witnessed assaulting someone.
So we can see that Gauntlet Edwina was actually the one targeted, and she took 48 and 2d8 damage. The 2 fists the other side of her made a dexterity saving throw. Because they failed, they took 2d8 damage each. For a level 3 spell slot on a class that's a half caster, that level 3 spell slots are the maximum. I do not think this is very good, especially since it actually affects allies as well, and it takes up your whole action. So I've just done, yeah, not enough damage, really. 27 damage, and I've used my action and the level 3 spell slot. I would have probably done better just to target a single enemy with my ranged weapon. This ranger, my Tav here, isn't really built for ranged weapons. He's much more about a melee attack here. But this doesn't really take into account what weapon you're using, which, you know, if I'd used volley, would have done. And I can do volley twice in a turn. Again, that's only for hunter rangers though. For me, this is another B tier. One good thing is it is lightning damage, so you could double it. But the damage is just not that high in the first place. It's really not inspiring me to be like, oh wow, I want to use lightning arrow. 2d8 damage, which can be saved. When you get this at level 9, that's just not enough. Had rangers somehow been a full caster class, then actually a bit better. We get it slightly earlier, you get higher level spell slots. So yeah, it's fine in the sense that it is an area of effect spell for rangers, but like I said for Conjure Barrage earlier, 1/3 of the class is subclasses. The Hunter Ranger at level 11 gets an alternative to using this essentially. Next up is Lightning Bolts. This is available to sorcerers, wizards, and bards via the magical secrets. Circle of the Land Druids can also get it if they pick the mountain variety. You have a 100-foot area ahead of you. Everyone inside has to make a dexterity saving throw or suffer the full 8d6 damage. On a pass, they take half the damage. This is quite nice. These 3 are in a row. Now this is lightning damage again. And look at that. For a level 3 spell slot on a class that has even higher spell slots available, and if we upcast it, you do actually do an extra damage. You do so much more damage than something like Lightning Arrow. Now we can't always compare spells between classes. It's just Lightning Arrow is at the forefront of my mind since I've just gone over it. But this is really, really cool. This is really, really good. Now the shape is very different to something like Fireball, which also does 8d6 damage. You do have to have enemies lined up, but it's a bit easier to line enemies up here because I can go to any position and try and get multiple enemies within that cone, and you can be a bit clever with it sometimes and just clip the edge of an enemy. Here I didn't need to do that, they were just perfectly lined up anyway. Now it kind of only seems fair if I put Fireball in S tier, put Lightning Bolt up there as well. Why? Because lightning damage can be doubled with the wet condition. If I'd had Shadowheart cast Create Water, or someone threw a water bottle on these 3, they would all 3 of them would be dead now. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be putting lightning damage towards the top. Mass Healing Word is next, which is available to clerics and bards via the magical secrets. What does it do? Well, it's just like Healing Word, but heals up to 6 allies within range. So if I cast it, it uses a bonus action. Now I have 2 pieces of equipment. It didn't show it. 2 pieces of equipment that buff the healing done here. So I've now also granted Bless and Blade Wards to everyone. Without those items, I'd probably put it down B or C. It can be quite nice to heal everyone up, but the healing done is minimal. It's just 1d4 plus your spellcasting modifier. Now it can be upcast, but you're only adding an extra 1d4 per spell slot above level 3. With these items, but they're very common items, very easy to get fairly early on even from the Druid's Grove. And especially, again, trying not to include subclasses, but someone's going to mention the Life Cleric out there. With the Life Cleric, with all the items perhaps at A, I'm going to leave it at B tier. It's going to be especially useful if you've got multiple people down and your Cleric is still up, and you can get multiple people up with a single bonus action. But it is a level 3 spell slot, and sometimes it is just going to be better to kill some enemies with, if you're a Cleric, you might want to use Glyph of Warding to kill enemies rather than just heal your allies for like between like 5 and 9 hit points. But the healing done is awful. I suppose you can do both at once, but that's 2 level 3 spell slots gone. When you get that at level 5, that's quite expensive. At level 12, it's not so bad, is it? I'm going to leave this at B tier. The healing done, and healing in general in the game is not worth for the healing. It's worth using if you've got any items that give bonuses, or if anyone is downed. Really, really good to get them back up. Next up is Plant Growth, available to bards, druids, archfey warlocks, nature domain clerics, rangers, and Oath of the Ancient Paladins. So you cast it on an area. Doesn't cause hostility. Doesn't require concentration. And the enemies inside have their movement speed quartered, divided by 4. Now basically it creates a surface. So if I create another surface here,
been vandalizing someone else's.
It gets overwritten, which is a bit sad. So I might not even see the effect of it being quartered. Oh no, I've got it here as well. So plant growth. It's going to kind of overwrite it back again. So we just stand back, leaving... Yeah, Shadow Heart. Whoops. We'll probably see these guys jump, if they can, or use rush attack. Quite a good choice, actually. Maybe a dash. Nope, just walking. So the AI will try and get out of it as best they can, which is, again, fair enough. Probably what they should be trying to do. So now they're at your mercy. Surely he's going to have to move now. Yeah. We won't be able to get very far through. So that's his turn done. So yeah, they'll try and use ranged attacks. One downside, I think quite a big downside to this, is if you do any sort of fire damage, it burns away. So any sort of fire damage gets rid of the surface and it's gone. Going to put it in B for a couple of reasons. It doesn't require concentration, which is why it's, you know, never going to be lower than B. Now it is good at kind of some crowd control, it's slowing the enemies down, but they can and do find ways out of it. And a bit like with Hunger of Hadar, on an enclosed area, like more like where my party is now, this will be much more useful because the enemies will be forced to go through it. So perhaps if you're cleverer than me, you might get more use of it out of A. But what I really dislike is the fact that fire damage deletes it. But I would have much preferred it if plant growth wasn't taken away by fire damage or any other surfaces. Next up is protection from energy. This is available to clerics, druids, sorcerers, wizards, rangers, Oath of the Ancients paladins, and Oath of Vengeance paladins. And my oh my, I wish someone would protect me from this spell because it's absolutely awful. You touch a creature and grant it resistance to either acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder, but it requires concentration on the level 3 spell slot. Even if it was until long rest, I don't know if I'd want a level 3 spell slot for this. There is a spell, protects you from poison, which is a level 2 spell slot, which doesn't require concentration. Whereas this requires concentration. Just concentration completely kills this, and it's only resistance. It's not immunity. It's not like I can do it for the whole party. It's just a single, whoops, shouldn't have come up here. A single target. I don't even want to cast it because it's just pointless. Alright, give it to himself. Whatever. Anyway, I don't know how you're going to get any use out of protection from energy. This is just one of the worst spells that we've got. If you really want resistance to one of those types of damage, just take a potion of the relevant type because that lasts until long rest, assuming you haven't got any other elixirs, and doesn't require concentration. You're not going to lose it randomly. Next is Remove Curse. Available to clerics, warlocks, wizards, bards from the magical secrets, and paladins. So you touch a creature or object to remove all curses and hexes affecting it. Now the thing is, it's not really clear what counts as a curse most of the time. Now, ahead of time, I've actually cast Bestow Curse just to show you that it can stop Bestow Curse. Not that enemies cast it on you. But its use isn't really in combat. So now they're not cursed. Obviously, I want them to be cursed, but the point is, it does remove it. There are just some situations where this can help. Now, I don't really want to say what they are because it really is very spoilery in terms of some of the storyline, or at least to show you how to get the curses. But one thing I'm a bit disappointed with is that, yeah, it's just not clear what is always a curse. And I tried looking up some examples of it online just to make sure I'm not being crazy here. But one thing it doesn't help with, for example, someone was asking, oh, look, some enemies in Act 2 are shadow cursed. It doesn't help. We can't use it to remove the actual shadow curse itself. A shadow cursed undead, so you can't use it to remove that. It doesn't help down in the Hag's Lair with the 4 enemies, NPCs with the masks on. You can't remove the curse there, the Hag's Curse. It just works sometimes with some things, sometimes it doesn't. Kind of going to put it at B tier. I mean, you can switch it in and out, because it's kind of a case of 4 clerics and warlocks and paladins. But I guess it's S tier, you can just use it when you need it, and when you do need it, you really need it. But for warlocks and bards, it's probably C or D tier, because you're not going to be using it for like 99% of the game, 95% of the game. So I'm just going to leave it kind of as I mentioned at the beginning. It's always going to be an average. I'm not going to have 2 different remove curses for 2 different sets of classes. So I'm just going to leave it in the middle. Revivify is next. Available to clerics, bards via the magical secrets, and paladins. So you can revive a companion. You can't just revive random dead NPCs. It must be a playable character Something happened to Shadowheart here. So we're going to revive her. They come back with a single hit point, and then we can try and save them. Depending on how easy or difficult you find the game, you may not have to use this in combat or not. I don't tend to have it prepared for combat. I try and struggle through if it ever happens and just revive them afterwards. Of course, you can just use a scroll of Revivify, but that costs money. You could pay Withers. That costs money. Or if you really want to, hire one of the minions, make them into a cleric, and just get them to cast it. Anyway, I think it's fine at A tier. Not S tier. There are too many other ways of actually revivifying people, and it's not too expensive anyway. 200 gold. I think most of us can scrounge up 200 gold if we really, really need to. Next up is Sleet Storm. Available to druids, sorcerers, wizards, nature and tempest domain clerics, and bards via the magical secrets. I should also point out storm sorcery sorcerers always get this, and circle of the land druids, if they pick arctic or coast, will also always have this. So what does it do? You call for the storm. This isn't really good description. It says that disrupts concentration of spellcasters, douses fires and creates an ice surface. Actually, it knocks people prone. Very large area, in fact. Now, it does require concentration. They all fell over. And every turn, I'll let it keep going. Another storm comes down, and then they have to make another saving throw. Right, they're gonna start getting annoyed now. Unfortunately, it doesn't make them wet, even though there's quite clearly rain falling from the sky. Oh well. Do bear in mind this does affect your allies also.
You were witnessed assaulting someone.
Kind of interestingly, creatures that are always flying don't get affected by surfaces, but it is overwritten by blood. But when it gets to, or any other surface for that matter, when it gets to Gale's turn, another set of ice will come down, and they've got to try and very carefully walk over the ice. So it is difficult terrain. They're going very slowly across the ice. Alright, so at the end of the turn, there's all of the ice coming down again. They fell over. When anyone falls prone in their turn, their turn ends. It's very strong. That's why it says it stops concentration, is because in Baldur's Gate 3, whether we like it or not, if you are prone, you have lost your concentration if you had it beforehand. I'm going to stick this in A tier because of the fact that it's concentration and the fact that it will affect your allies as well, so you need to have lots of ranged attacks ready. But the effect is good. Sometimes the area is almost too big. You have to be very, very careful where you place it, but nevertheless, a very good crowd control spell. Next up is Slow, available to sorcerers, wizards, Great Old One warlocks, knowledge domain clerics, and bards via the magical secrets. All warlocks can also pick an invocation at level 5, which is called Maya the Mind. So what does it do? Target up to 6 creatures, also when you slow them. Movement and actions are affected, so the AC and dexterity saves go down by 2. When they're slow, they can only take 1 action or bonus action per turn and only 1 attack, and can't take any reactions, and the movement speed is halved. It's a wisdom saving throw to resist. Now, no one else is within range, sadly, just out of range. All 3 of them are now slowed, and they can barely move. Now, it has been reported that actually slowed gives a -2 penalty to all saving throws. Let's just double check that. Let's use wisdom. So yes, currently slow is bugs in our favor. Some enemies do use slow, stop them if you can. And -2 to all saving throws at the moment. This is being recorded in patch 3. This might be changed in the future, who knows. Anyway, this is for me an A tier spell. Problem with it is it really competes with haste. It's not like you completely take out enemy actions, and usually it's probably better for us to have an extra action so we can kill another enemy rather than slowing them down, but it's still such a good crowd control spell. Next up is Speak with Dead, available to bards and clerics. It is also worth pointing out that this can be picked up from the Amulet of Lost Voices, which is available where you find withers in the same tomb. And also there is an item that gives you this. I guess it's a spoiler, so I'm not really going to say any more than that. So you have to target a corpse. If the corpse is too badly damaged or too old, the skeleton, it can't be used. But you can try and cast it here.
The corpse does not respond.
Now the thing is, not everyone will have something to say. Also, the fact is, I killed these people, and people who are dead don't like to speak to the people who killed them. And some courses in the game just have nothing to say. Speak with Dead is a ritual, so it doesn't take a spell slot outside of combat, and you're not going to be casting it inside of combat. And once you've cast it once in the day, corpses start to get highlighted, and if you're wondering what that is, these are corpses that actually have something to say. So this is at Waukeen's Rest, not too far into the game. We can see another one lit up there, the Flaming Fist Mercenary. And then we can cast it. And you get 5 questions maximum. Some corpses, you have only 5 possible questions. Sometimes there are more than 5 questions. And once you've asked those 5 questions, that's it. You cannot cast a spell on that corpse again. So here I've got 5 questions. And now I've actually got more questions after asking one of them. Sometimes, so was the raid successful?
The corpse remains silent.
If you ask them questions where the answer would come from after their death, they don't know. And they won't tell you. They're not psychic. They only give you the knowledge that they had while they were alive. This spell is really important because you can find lots of extra information. Secret ways in. There are a few caveats with this spell. So I killed True Soul God a long time ago. And if Astarion tries to speak to her,
The corpse seems willing to speak, but not to its killer.
and there are ways around that. One way around it is to cast Disguise Self on yourself, so you look like someone else, and then cast Speak with Dead, and the NPC doesn't know. Alternatively, you can get someone who wasn't there. Shadowheart wasn't here during the time of the fight, and she can ask all the questions she wants. I'm going to put this in S tier, but I would try and find a way to... I basically would use your cleric for this. You don't need to use a spell known on your bard to do this, really. Especially when there are one item you can wear, a necklace, and another item that can give you this permanently, which is how Astarion is currently trying to cast it. But otherwise, yeah, really, really good spell. Helps you in throughout the game, lots of extra information, and I think it's a cool spell as well. Next up is Spirit Guardians, for clerics and bards via their magical secrets. And this is basically every cleric's favourite spell. So, there are 2 variants. You can either deal necrotic or radiant damage. I would say for this game, radiant damage is probably going to be the better one, because necrotic damage is definitely resisted far more often, and there are items that benefit from radiant damage also. So you cast it. On the initial casting, anyone inside the area takes 3d8 damage unless they pass a wisdom saving throw. If they pass, they take half damage still, and then as you run around, pop, pop, enemies will take damage. And it's concentration, and the enemies will probably avoid Shadowheart. What we can try and do, maybe throw someone into Spirit Guardians. So if they end their turn here... lost. Anyway, if they finish their turn there, they would have taken that 3d8 damage. Enemies can only take the damage once per turn. Do be careful that you do keep concentration. Assuming you can deal out so much damage over the turns that you have it. And you can upcast it to do more damage. And for clerics, this is the spell that all the other spells are competing for concentration with. It's such a good damaging spell, because once you've cast it, on the next turn, you can cast Glyph of Warding perhaps. So you can do damage in multiple ways once you've got Spirit Guardians going. One thing I also want to point out that I didn't show you earlier is that while enemies are within the area of Spirit Guardians, their movement speed is halved. So it's pretty much like difficult terrain. Next up is Stinking Cloud, available to bards, sorcerers, wizards, and fiend warlocks, and Circle of the Land druids if they pick the Swamp or Underdark land. Now before, I think it was before patch 3, this was bugged and the DC was set at 12, but now it's actually the spellcaster's DC that is used. So you create a cloud of gas so nauseating it prevents creatures from taking actions if they fail a Constitution saving throw. So let's try and start this. Upcasting it doesn't do anything. It will affect allies. So now all 4 of these who failed their saving throw, they cannot now take an action. They can still use a bonus action and they can still move, but they can't use their actual action. So I'm just going to start combat.
We witnessed assaulting someone.
It is a concentration spell, so which is why I sent Gale back there. So now Gale can do something else on his turn. He doesn't have to worry about recasting it. It does require concentration, but say maybe he wants to cast, I don't know, Ray of Frost. Keep it simple. Thank you. So now they're not going to do anything with their action. So they can use a bonus action. They're jumping around, but they're not hurting me, which I think is pretty awesome. And they seemingly just come to the nearest one of your party. They don't seem to think ahead any further than that. And so now, perhaps I can try and throw one of them back in. and they're nauseous. They're not going to take an action. And taking away an action of especially higher level enemies can be very good because they can get 2 attacks, maybe even 3 if they're a fighter, which can be quite debilitating sometimes. Going to stick this in A because once again it affects allies and requires concentration, and it's on classes that have haste mostly, potentially can have haste at least. It's a decently sized area and really prevents you from being hurt. It doesn't deal any damage, but it's still a very good crowd control spell, especially now it uses the spellcaster save DC. Next up is Vampiric Touch. This is available to warlocks, wizards, and bards via the magical secrets, and Circle of the Land Druids who pick Swamp will also learn this. So it requires your concentration very sadly. Then you touch an enemy to you have to make an attack roll, and if you hit them, you do 3d6 necrotic damage, and you also get some hit points back. Now this person here is held, so I'm actually going to do double the damage. Didn't do that as an accident. So I did 30 damage, healed myself for 15. Kinda cool. Now it's concentration because in subsequent turns I'll be able to use it again. But it's just not that good. For the most part, you probably don't want to have your wizard up close and personal, and if it is, then they're quite likely to be taking damage and forcing lots of constitution saving throws to maintain concentration. And it's just against a single target. 3d6 isn't very much. Even at the lower levels, at level 5, as a warlock or wizard, 2d8 or 2d10, and if you've got Eldritch Blast even higher, so the damage isn't that good, and being healed for half the damage just isn't very much either. I mean, on average, 3d6 is 10.5 damage, which I'm healing 5 damage per turn. And for getting up and close and personal, that's not going to heal enough. This is an exception right here. Because of that critical hit. Guaranteed critical hit. I really don't like the spell. I really think it's D tier. The concentration, the melee requirement, and the damage just isn't very good. You can upcast it. You deal an additional 1d6 necrotic damage for each spell slot above level 3. But am I going to use Vampiric Touch or try and use Lightning Bolt, Fireball? Probably going to get more use out of the ones up here than I am out of Vampiric Touch. And lastly, Warden of Vitality. This is available to bards via the magical secrets and paladins. So it takes an action to cast. It doesn't require concentration. And on that turn and the next 10 turns, you can use a bonus action to heal someone within range for 2d6 damage. So, I mean, he himself has actually got the fewest hit points. 5 hit points back. Now, outside of combat, you can cast this faster than once per turn. So that's 9 turns remaining. 1.
Spasm grip.
Yeah. Right, try that again. So I've got 7 turns remaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can put it onto a hotkey. 8, 9. Anyway, the point is, you outside of combat, you can do it more than once per turn. That's pretty cool. It's kind of only 2d6 healing, so it's not going to save you, but it does not require concentration. I'm going to put it at A tier. I don't think the healing is quite enough to stick it into S tier, but in a very difficult fight, assuming your paladin or bard hasn't gone down, you can get someone back up with a bonus action every single turn without expending a spell slot. Now, all you clever people might be thinking, aha, what if I make a life cleric? So I've made Lae'zel here. A life cleric, she has Disciple of Life. So when casting a healing spell, the target regains additional hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. It's just to show that off, if I pick a level 1 Cure Wounds, get the 10 from the spellcasting modifier and the healing roll, and an additional 3. Awesome. So, Warden of Vitality. Got this here. It says level 3 evocation spell. But we don't get an extra 5 hit points every time we cast it. So if anyone was wondering about that combination, it does not work, sadly. It'd be amazing if it did. So this is my tier list. Now the level 3 spells, level 3 is really where the spells start to kick off. There are so many amazing spells in the level 3 spells. And someone made a point last time that I've got more S tier spells than C tier spells, which probably means I'm doing it wrong. I would argue that's not really the case, because it's not like every class has access to every single spell. Like up here, we've got 1, 2, 3 of these. 4 of these are available to clerics, but they're not mutually exclusive. On a single turn, I can't use both, but I can use Spirit Guardians one turn and Glyph of Warding the next. I don't need to use Spirit Guardians every single turn. Outside of combat, Speak with Dead isn't competing with any of these here. It's actually a ritual spell even. And for the level 3 spells especially, I would say it's a case of these are some really good spells. I understand their point, that perhaps I'm ranking things not quite well enough. But let me know what you think. Which of these spells you think deserve to go down or up, maybe? Thank you if you've made it this far, and thank you to all the members of my channel, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.